Friday Night Tirade. This is PrimerTime on UCY.tv. My name is Michael, and from my back porch, I can almost see the apocalypse.
My name is Nicholas, and it's just good to be here, because I'll tell you what, it's better than the alternative.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. So how's life been treating you? You doing all right?
Life is good. Got a little update. Went out and checked a trail cam that I have out at the farm, and oh my great googly moogly, there are some large deer out there in the farm.
I saw a couple of those pictures that you sent me, and tell you what, that did look like some tasty lunch right there.
Yeah, I'm hoping that as of October 1st, I'm going to be able to take a selfie with a couple of those guys.
That would be nice.
Yeah. You just dropped one in chat. That's our young guy. That's a young 8-pointer that's in chat. If you guys can see that right now, sent Michael a couple of them. There's a wicked 11-point uneven 12 that's rolling around, and this guy is big. He is number one on my hit list.
Yeah, there's some good looking. There's some good looking mounts right there. Really, really nice looking racks, and they look to be fairly decent sized. They create put a nice a fill on your freezer. That's something we can discuss real quick. Is how do you like to have yours processed? So
last year I did them myself with one of my hunting partners. Out here, the going rate is about $60 to $80 to get a deer processed, and realistically, you're doing half the work for the processor anyways. Because once you take down a deer in the field, you're going ahead and you're removing, you're removing the stomach, you're removing the intestines, and getting rid of a good 30 to 35% of the body weight just by removing the we call the leavings or the entrails. The problem is that when you go and you take it to a processor, you never really know if what you're getting back is what you took to them.
Your stuff. That's really a problem, and I think that's kind of why you have to have a really good relationship with your processor. There's a couple guys in my area that are pretty tight, and I'll tell you, they've always treated everybody right, and I don't think anybody's really complained. Now that may not be what exactly happened, but. Well, what are you looking at price-wise in your area for for them to make sausage for you?
So you're going to get whatever it is. It's $80 for them to process your deer, and then depending upon what kind of damage the deer has to it.
When you process the deer, you mean dragging in a whole carcass of a deer?
Exactly. So when I take down a deer, if I choose to go to a processor, it's going to cost me $60 to get whatever cuts of meat that they can get off of that deer. They'll probably take about 20% of the meat themselves. That's the going thing out here. A lot of people will they'll want that done because they don't have to go through the trouble of butchering it themselves. But fortunately, I've got a crew of guys that I hunt with, and we are self-sufficient. The only reason why I would ever really take it to a processor is if it's if it's unfeasible for me to get it done that day. Typically, you do not want to mess around once you have a deer on the ground. You want to make sure that you get that cooled off as quickly as possible. Because
right, and I agree with you. I agree with you in cleaning the deer in the field right then and there. It's a valuable skill to have. Mainly, what I meant by the processor is having it turned into like lovely sausage.
Right, and that's what I'm getting at is that once you go through and you do we call it the field dressing. You're taking out, first off, you're bleeding it to make sure that you're not going to contaminate anything, especially if there's a gut shot or anything like that. So you've got two chambers of the deer, which is separated by a diaphragm, just like in our bodies. Depending upon if you have a good trophy buck, you might want to take a little bit of care in making sure that you're cutting very, very low behind the shoulder on the brisket and around to make sure that you can take out the throat and the esophagus and all that down to the stomach, and then rip it out the back end. That way you can have a mount ready if that's what you decide to do. Since I do my mounts in the European tradition, I make them look like white, museum pieces. That's not so much of a concern for me. And plus it's a lot cheaper to do. So when I actually take it to the processor, the deer has been opened up from just underneath the jawbone all the way down to the back end. The ribs have been broken, so the hips have been broken. That area can start cooling off immediately and can really help cooling the deer down and fight bacteria growth, which is 90% of where people say that gamey taste comes from. It's not because deer have a inherently nasty taste. It's because people are eating deer that's not been processed correctly.
Well, and then there's also the question about does the adrenaline bump that the deer had when it sustained the injury, prior to its demise.
Well, like I said, dependent upon how that deer was taken, the deer may not have the ability to produce enough adrenaline, because quite oftentimes deer drop right on the spot, and then on other times, they run for 60, 70, maybe 120 yards, depending upon where the shot placement was. One of the things people don't remember is that shot placement and practice beforehand is really what helps you have a lot less work to do later on. It's not exactly fun getting down on your hands and knees and searching for very, very small trails of blood from a poor shot. So in order to stave off from having to do that, you want to make sure that you put in the time at the range beforehand, whether you're doing stuff with a bow or whether you're using rifle later in the season.
Out of the chat, we got a question, and the question is what would be the main problems and the main concerns of taking an animal to a processor? And it would be like the chemicals or hormones that they'd add to it. And I'd say that it's not necessarily any kind of chemical or hormone additives that you'd have to worry about with the processor. I'd say the primary concern, like we discussed, was that you don't necessarily get the animal that you shot.
Yeah, so put it this way. They're not going to inject a deceased animal with any kind of hormone or supplementary chemical, because that costs money. Processors are not there to take off from their profit margin. I mean, during the season they have about a 3-month window where they work very fast and they work very hard, but after that time goes out, deer are not legal to take in most places, and they're not trying to lose money on the deal by adding something to something that naturally doesn't need it. The biggest concern to me is number one, what is the reputation of the processor that you're taking it to? Because very often people will take something that they've shot and they'll take it to a processor, and the processor will go out of business and not tell anybody. B, the processor will perform shoddy work or have very poor cleanliness standards, or 3, you'll get the wrong order. You'll get somebody else's order attached to your game, which just screws up what you wanted to do with what you brought them.
I would say that my biggest concern would be getting the animal that you shot and knowing what they use for the filler fats when they make sausage, and that's something we should address. Is that they usually add pork or beef fat to the deer or even to the pig, because wild pig is definitely leaner than farm pigs. But some people would have concern about where they got that fat from.
Right, and so that's one of the things that some processors will actually encourage folks to do, is that if you say like you take a deer, you want to have two rump roasts, you want to have tenderloins, you want to have back straps, and then maybe from the front shoulders, which is probably where 70-80% of the shots are taken. Some people hit the lungs, some people hit the liver, but 9 times out of 10 people are trying to break through that front shoulder or just below the front shoulder and go right through the heart. So that shoulder area turns into a gelatinous mess, and what's left on that shoulder is some good meat once they cut away the blood stained areas from the shot. But there's not a whole lot you can do with that meat other than grind it up, combine it with some type of fat, because deer is very lean, and then have that turned into sausage.
And let's get to the important part of the sausage. Do you prefer wet sausage, or do you prefer the dry sausage? I personally prefer the dry sausage, like beef sticks, and that's probably a bad thing, because I can eat like a 4-pound bag of that in a heartbeat.
Well, why do you think Slim Jims are so popular?
These are it's 10 times a Slim Jim. It's 1,000 times a Slim Jim, or something like that. I last time I had a Slim Jim, honestly, it tasted like cardboard with like beef fatty flavor on it.
Yeah.
It was kind of gross. And no, it's that's like whatever casing that they use, but usually a smaller processor will use a natural gut casing. And well, yeah, I'll tell you, they make some really excellent stuff. And I have to give a shout out to Bubba's in Fort O'Connor, Texas, because he makes some really good stuff.
Yeah, and like I said, depending upon where you're at, across the Midwest and the upper tier of the United States, that's big whitetail deer country, and those processors, a guy working in the cutting room, he can do a deer in 2.5 minutes, and I'm talking from just brought in, thrown off the back of the truck, getting some cuts in behind the Achilles tendons to hold the deer above suspended, and he can be through that deer with the skin off in 2 minutes. It's not uncommon for a processor to get very good at handling the knives. And oh, by the way, public safety announcement: more people hurt themselves with dull knives than with sharp knives. So, that's one of the things that you got to be aware of. And if you don't know how to take care of any kills that you have in the field, refer to your state's Department of Game and Inland Fisheries or Wildlife, because they'll have pamphlets already produced. I mean, if you don't have the opportunity to go out with somebody and learn how to do it hands-on, don't be afraid to take a hunter safety course, because most of them have a field skills day that's part of the test to get your safety license current. And you get a chance to go ahead and actually put your hands inside the, body cavity of a deer and do the hard work, because everybody that's ever taken a deer knows that the easy work is done once you pull the trigger. Then the fun begins.
Well, and a lot of that fun involves lifting heavy things off the ground, which means you have to bend over and like use your back and not your legs.
This is
like
why
that.
God invented winches.
Yeah, no kidding. And shout out to the Kawasaki Corporation for the fine mule that they make, which can haul almost any dead animal in.
That's right. So yeah, like I said, I'm very excited. Our season starts on October 1st, beginning with bow season, and then moving into muzzleloader about October 31st, thereabouts, and then general firearms begins 19 November. So we are at T minus 31 days right now, or 30 days, and we will be in the fields looking for God's creatures to meet their untimely demise.
And praise be to the stakes.
Yes.
So speaking of deer and getting yourself a rack and spikes and velvet and all that, we got a spike in firearms ownership in the United States being reported. Townhall.com is reporting that 44% of American households identify as owning a firearm of some sort, handgun, rifle, or shotgun. That's kind of an interesting number in the face of the mainstream media and the gun-grabbing Bolsheviks and our coffee brewing friends that continually say it's like the same 12 guys in the United States who are buying all these massive numbers of firearms every month. And if you just take a look at the FBI's numbers for the last 2 years, and you will see that almost every month outdoes the month previous. I think it's an NCIS check, which means at least the sale of one firearm is occurring. Those happen like every 42 seconds or something like that. This is, I guess, good news for us, but I don't think that this information is accurate, because I'm guessing that a lot of people will just say, no, I don't have one. There's going to be a good portion of people that say, no, I won't have one, just because they are a little bit paranoid.
Well, no, I don't even think that's paranoid or paranoia setting in. I think it's no one's right to know what I have or what I don't have. No one has to report to me that they have a boat. No one has to report to me that they have a certain number of knives. No one reports to me that they've got, electrical devices or batteries that can, be used to shock and kill people. I think that, number one, a lot of the registration requirements are, purely to keep, folks in a database. And, we have an aversion as Americans to being included in databases. there's no database in the U.S. for the number of people who have been involved in DUIs and have had their licenses revoked because they've killed somebody. We don't have that, and I think you have far more drunk driving deaths annually than you have firearm deaths. So the problem is that unless you're in a place like Chicago, you're really pretty much going to be in an area where you have a good chance of people owning firearms at that 45 to 50%. So you're going to be in one of two choices on whether you decide to mess with somebody about them having a gun or not.
Well, and you bring up the issue of Chicago, and honestly, that's a study in failure right there. There's an interesting website called HeyJackass.com. And it compiles a lot of statistics on Chicago, and it's fairly in-depth. And if you just look at that, you can see that August numbers are, I think it's somewhere around 850 shootings in Chicago, where there are some of the strictest handgun laws in the United States. And a lot of people like to point to that's not accurate. They've changed the laws. Well, the laws have really only been changed for about a year and a half, and it's still not. I mean, there's still not a place within the city of Chicago to buy a firearm or to shoot a firearm legally. You have to travel outside the area, and the laws haven't been relaxed. You can just own a firearm in your home now.
Yeah. So from the website, their statistics show through August 29th, which is today, or actually, I'm sorry, yesterday. There is a person shot in Chicagoland every 2 hours and 1 minute, and then a person is murdered every 11 hours 54 minutes. So, a broken clock is right twice a day, right?
I think that is. It's right every 11 hours apparently.
Yeah, 11 hours 54 minutes, and the horrible thing is that. Chicago has year-to-date shot and killed 441 people within the city and its surrounding environs. Shot and wounded 2,429, and a total of homicides of 490. For the week in progress, they've got 8 homicides, and for August, 86 homicides. That sounds like a very polite society to me.
I think that whatever they're doing there is absolutely not working. And if you go further into that website and look at more of these Chicago statistics, which Chicago seems to be the focal point for a lot of the firearms-related arguments, with the gun control and firearms freedom. And one of the glaring things that's, I think, just blatant to me, if you were to look at these facts, honestly, that it's 7 neighborhoods within the city of Chicago or the Chicagoland area, which encompasses Chicago and its surrounding suburbs. But there's 7 neighborhoods in that city that make up 85% of the actions. I dare say that it's not necessarily a problem with firearms; it's a problem with those 7 neighborhoods.
Well, that's why Black Lives Matter.
Apparently not there, because the numbers in Chicago show a predominant number of Black Americans that are killed.
So my question is this: in such a city as Chicago, where you obviously have a municipal duty of the elected civilian government to provide for the common defense and the general welfare of the population, where is the outrage? Where's the outrage over the mayor?
The mayor of Chicago, our dual citizen friend Rahm Emanuel, who served in the Israeli military, not the American army or any of the American military services, but in the Israeli services, has continually shuffled and butt danced on this and has blamed firearms. That's really the answer.
But that's part and parcel for the course. We're gonna blame the tool. We're not going to blame the individual. So we're blaming the wrong tool, actually. Because we're not blaming the tool who's pulling a trigger. We're blaming the tool who can't defend itself.
I find the Chicago argument to be particularly maddening because the statistics are there. The facts are plain as day for anybody to do the bare minimum of research on this. And then you will see people, especially their law enforcement and their city officials. And I'm not saying anything about the civilians and the citizens in that town and the religious officials that are just honestly all hooked up on the MSN dope, because that's what it is. It's they love getting on TV to say, stop the violence and gun violence. This well, even though those numbers with the shooting deaths and the shootings in Chicago were bad, those numbers are also just a small part of the issue, because Chicago is a very violent area. There's murders by knives. There's murders by beatings and bludgeonings. There's arson. It's a large cornucopia of of the violence channel in Chicago, and they continue to focus on the firearms. Well, which we know they have to take the firearms if they wish to, complete the evil plans they have in store for us, quite honestly. And to that end, Homeland Security has taken over control of the elections.
Yeah. Speaking of elections, I just dropped a nugget in chat. We've got the official race has been called in Florida. The former Democratic Committee national chairman has won re-election in her district.
Yeah. Guess what? The election is, what is that, Thursday, I think?
No, she had hers tonight.
Was it tonight? Oh.
Yeah. Rubio won his earlier in the day, and Wasserman Schultz just won hers right now.
Very interesting. I thought it was later on this week. Well, glad to see the empire rolls on. What can you say about Debbie Wasserman Schultz? Except for
she loves Taco Bell voters, I'll tell you that much.
She's a traitor. She's a traitor. She works for the enemy, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Well, you think about it. This has not been a good week for the Jew in politics, because I believe the headline was Huma cuts off Wiener.
And that's a very, very interesting subject right there. Yeah, there was. Anthony Weiner's a gift to the distraction industry, because he's a pile of headlines, man. I mean, cuts off Weiner. Huma's fed up with Weiner, and I find that to just be, along the lines of the hilarious, but in the distraction realm, because also this week was the information that Huma wrote for the Muslim Brotherhood newsletter or whatever it was, which I find just to be just completely just almost hilarious, that here she is, like Bin Laden's little sister or whatever they're trying to, paint her out to be, but yet she's married to the very most stereotypical Jew in the world. How does that work?
That's a marriage made in heaven. I'll tell you that. That was a marriage made for keeping the peace.
I think there's somebody slacking on the beheading duties on that one right there.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, that's one of those things that, having been to assorted and sundry places in the Middle East myself, the Juden, as they're called in Germany, don't tend to get along with anybody else out there, and much less get married to them. So that was an interesting match to begin with. And, the problem that I see here is that not only do we have, the former congressman, because people like to kind of, forget that he was serving in our Congress, and mayoral candidate, he was actually leading his mayoral race, trying to get back into the public spotlight before the Sydney Leathers thing broke and really took him down. He ended up with like 5% of the vote in that mayoral race that gave us the new His Honor in New York. And this guy was saying that he, just a few weeks ago, he would get back into the mayoral race to prevent a Trump from running for New York City mayor. So I think the only thing he's going to be running from is alimony.
And I would almost guess that he'd run back to the Holy Land, because they don't have an extradition treaty with the United States. Our bestest buds in the Middle East. What a bunch of pals.
Yeah, you got to remember, it's often referred to as the only democracy in the Middle East.
That's right. Hey, listen, if it wasn't for them, why Well, let's not think about that.
Yeah, let's not go there. So,
Okay, so
the interesting
uh,
thing, very, very close and not very far away from where I'm making my abode. We've got another story about people getting fed up with these unmanned drones, and a woman taking a 20 gauge and making some target practice out of it. 65
I
year old,
love this story.
yeah,
I love this
65 year
story,
old woman.
and it's true. A 20 gauge will do anything a 12 will do.
That's right, just at a shorter distance. So, she was actually a 65-year-old woman from county about a little ways north of me, and she was cleaning two shotguns on her porch, a 410 and a 20 gauge, when she had the neighbor, yes, Robert Duvall, had seen two men setting up on a card table basically a drone, and she had one buzzing right over her field, and she felt that they were scaring the cows. So she went ahead and dropped said gun and picked up the 20 and then used a bird shot, and there it goes.
I respect her choice in that, and that kind of brings us to like a very interesting subject. The proper choice of what you're going to use to shoot at whatever you choose to shoot at. So in that case, the 20 gauge was a perfect choice.
Yeah, the only thing now is that she was upset that there has been some damage to her tractor because there's been some debris left in the field, and that she's had two punctures in her lawn tractor. So, could be worse. Where Minnesota has had a Minneapolis gun buyback program that was being offered by the cops, and the basically what ended up happening was that quite a few people decided to go ahead and dispose of firearms that weren't necessarily up to their standards, and decided that they were going to take the opportunity to go ahead and get the buyback money, and the collection actually only netted about 150 only about 150 of the guns. So
Okay, so what happened with that right there?
so the funny thing is that we've talked about it before. The gun buybacks, when they happen, it's just an opportunity for police departments to really prey on the feelings and fears of older citizens who themselves either may be approaching senility or some other type of medical condition that's age-related that prevents them from feeling safe and able to provide for the security of firearms in their own homes. And so they give these citizens of their communities the opportunity to come in, turn in what they say are firearms to get them out of the community's hands, and then offer them some kind of minimal cost, like a gift card for $100 or $200.
I can't believe that I came back into this call and you're talking about giving away guns due to senility.
Well, that's what they're pushing, right? So
Well, at least you were talking about me. I don't know where we took off at that, but we were talking about the drone and then the call dumped me or whatever. But
yeah.
I think that's because we were about to give away the secret word of the day: kill all robots.
Yeah,
kill all robots.
It's definitely one of those weekends where internet has been it's been spotty out here. We're not exactly getting ready to have the weather. The tropical depressions are going to be hitting down in North Carolina, but give it a chance. It's like we're still on dial-up.
I'd like to give a sincere best wishes to our friends in Florida. My friend Cracker, my friend Chris, my friends David and Shirley are down in Florida, and good luck. I hope whatever's going to hit you doesn't hit you too hard, and better you guys than me.
Yeah, right now,
Um,
Outer Banks in North Carolina, Kill Devil Hills, Kitty Hawk, that area, that's where one of the tropical depressions is getting ready to hit. So,
yeah, yeah. Good luck to my friend Frog in the Carolinas, because boy, yes, those storms like to share a little bit.
yeah,
So listen, we got a story out of Mexico, and it's the Mexican attorney general. Or, I'm sorry, she's not the Mexican attorney general. She's the Mexican foreign minister, and she'd like to push another round of gun control in the United States.
yeah. So, the interesting thing that I see here is, since when do we follow the lead or follow up on somebody's request from a foreign entity, a foreign government, to change our laws? Because I'll notice that she didn't come up with a
Who
request.
does she think she is? Israeli or something? Come on now, woman.
Exactly. I don't seem to remember her enacting a request for us to put up the border wall to keep guns out of her country, right? I didn't hear that request.
No, and this is once again, I think, kind of. I don't think the people who are in charge are necessarily nationalistic people. I think that the nationalism is being viewed as an evil thing, and quite frankly, these are all globalists. And when you call them globalists, you almost have to call them communists, because that's really what it is in the end. It's a totalitarian system of government that they wish to put on you, and they cannot do it unless they take away the firearm in this nation. And so that push will be relentless from the inside and from out.
Yeah. So this lady's name is Claudia Ruiz Massieu, and she is the foreign minister of Mexico. And she's called for the second conference of state parties to the Arms Trade Treaty of the UN. And she's calling on the United States Congress to pass a new ban on firearms that she labels assault weapons. And this is a story coming to us from Greg Camp at guns.com. She's basically saying that assault weapons cause harm on both sides of the border. And in her view, that guns are illegal in Mexico, and they're being brought in through the border by American citizens, smuggling them into her country. And stopping the flow of these firearms is a high priority in Mexico. So,
Well,
never mind the fact that stopping the flow of narcotics going north into the United States is nowhere near as high a priority, or bringing in the level of cartel violence and getting that under control is not nearly the priority that they have.
No, but honestly, there's a proper venue for this, and it's through the State Department. If she'd like to speak to the Secretary of State, she can just write a check like everybody else.
Yeah, minimum was it $50,000 minimum? I think you can actually get on. You can get on.
Yeah, $50,000, I think, got you like a phone call or something like that, or like a coffee meeting or something. We go back to Raj Fernando, who basically was a stock trader who bought a position on the Nuclear Advisory Board. He paid a cool $1 million to get on that. So yeah,
yeah. There was a Nigerian prince that was also
speed costs. How fast do you want to go? Is the motto, I guess.
Yeah. How important to us are you? That
really?
was the question, because every one of these emails that are being released now goes in and talks about the advisors to Hillary letting Huma Abedin know how important someone is to the Secretary of State at the time by direct comparison to the amount of money they made in donations to the Clinton Global Initiative.
I think that's only fair. I mean, any other way is discrimination, really.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I've got no problem telling El Senorita, Ministerio, Extremadura to F off, or as we say in Spanish.
Yeah. Well, we can't say it because we have people who listen to this who speak Spanish. But
damn. I'm just not cool. I'm not cool with somebody trying to interfere, because the big threat right now is Russia getting ready to interfere in our elections by hacking the voting machines.
Right, and Once they do that, then Kim Il Jong is going to execute us all with a bunch of anti-aircraft guns.
And speaking of anti-aircraft guns, his choice of firearm in that regard is either the 23 millimeter or the 14.5 millimeter. And these are former Soviet Union, designed and produced weapons. These were very viable air defense weapons, and what we would used to call air defense artillery. And at some point they were just called anti-aircraft artillery back in the day.
Do you honestly believe that he did that? Because I'll tell you what, I didn't hear. Number one, I didn't hear about it on North Korea Twitter, the absolute source for everything North Korea.
You may not hear about that on KCNA.
But honestly, like anytime they always have he did something just far more dastardly than the last time. He's like the slant-eyed Bin Laden or something. I mean, last time it was he fed a general, like his cousin who is a general, to a bunch of dogs.
Well,
I think this
his
is like
uncle, actually.
Yeah, and then like he like dropped an ICBM on somebody, and then I think he's done this, blowing people up with anti-aircraft guns.
I can tell you that in my professional capacity, I have no opinion on it. What are you talking about?
I was at a family barbecue when this all occurred.
Yes. So if he were to use such a firearm in such a manner, he would either be using the 14.5 millimeter KPVT, which is currently both an air defense role, and it's actually been fitted to a couple of armored wheeled vehicles in the old Soviet, in their old weapons production line, or the 23 millimeter, which is normally fitted to either a twin carriage variant or attached to a self-propelled prime mover, and it's called the ZSU 23-4. So you also have the ZPU, which is the towed anti-aircraft artillery, and that is they have it in the twin and quadruple configuration. So quad barrel configuration, it's hooked up to a fire control radar, usually optically tracked, and you've got a guy sitting behind it who's basically got a sight, and he's got a little manual computer trying to take down stuff. It's pretty easy to hit somebody who's attached to a post, though, with one of it.
Really, if they're not moving and flying and all that. So you would say that one round from one of those would be able to stop a Hyundai?
Oh yeah, one round is going to go through a Hyundai, and not only that, as going through a person, it's going to give them a significantly bad day.
Yeah, it will leave a large exit wound.
Yeah, there's a saying, and if he decides to use incendiary rounds, which is quite common for AAA, which is the anti-aircraft artillery, we always say that you can make a man a fire and he stays warm for a night, but you can set a man on fire and he stays warm for the rest of his life.
That's kind of accurate right there. I don't know. I find those stories.
I almost feel like there should be like a star going across the screen, and now you know.
Knowing is half the battle, and violence is the other half.
That's right. Extreme violence and prejudice.
All right. So speaking of extreme violence and prejudice, we got a story that's kind of along the lines of what we cover here, and it's got kind of a significance to you and I because, and more so to you, but to me because I watched it occur in the news while you were stuck in the sandbox, and it looks like, in 2006 and 2007, just a little bit of history, during our adventures in Iraq, the United States came in and pacified within a couple years and pretty much put everything on the path to democracy and righteousness. And then there was what they called the rise of the insurgents, which led to the troop surge, which was an insert of, I think somewhere around 500,000 troops extra that went in.
Yeah, we had 540,000 soldiers in the Army at that time. So and we had over 500,000 standing army,
and pretty much all of them were in the desert at that time. It was quite a stressful time, and as it turns out, it was a stressful time that didn't need to happen. And this really brings to mind: is this corruption? Is this incompetence? Is this? I'd say this is a definite plan. I don't think it's that corrupt, and I don't think it's that much incompetence. I think this is a plan, and it shows that quite a few weapons went missing during that time, which were directly attributable to the rise of the insurgents and injuries to American
Yeah,
American
certainly.
citizens that were in that area.
Yeah, certainly. You know,
And
I just dropped it in chat that the U.S. government provided more than 1.45 million firearms, and that could be M4s, could be AK-47s, could be high precision small arms marksman rifles. That's could be pistols, and the numbers are in chat. I mean, it's a lot of firearms, and as Michael said, I was there. I was on the business end of these deals, and I can tell you that in the gun bazaars of every major town, if you brought enough dinar, you could make yourself the brand new owner of a formerly American service rifle. Um, back by 2006 would have been what was called the height of the sectarian violence, or the Iraqi Shia Sunni civil war. Our government downplayed that it was a civil war, but I'll tell you, when you've got different religious factions going into hospitals, killing people that are strapped to gurneys because of explosions from car bombs, and then executing them in their hospital beds because they could tell that you were one or the other. That's a civil war. Not exactly civil in the good sense, but yeah, you got one faction going against another, and that was it.
and it didn't have to happen. It was well, there was a lot of troops lost, and a lot of guys got injured, whether it's psychologically injured or physically injured. A lot of stress to a lot of families. I'm sure there was a lot of marriages that broke up. I'm sure it had deleterious effects on their children. I mean, if you start like figuring out how many kids dropped out of high school because their dad was gone, fighting this stupid fucking war that didn't have to be fought, that we built, that the money being built, that the financiers built, that the goddamn war hawks built. John McCain and his all have a war in the desert for 100 years.
Hey, Hillary Clinton was involved in that, if I seem to remember correctly, because before she was against the war, she voted for the war, right?
Right, but she's repudiated that, and she's disavowed it.
Oh, that's right. She was
admitted her
misled.
mistake, and
she was misled.
Right, she's like wiped it with a cloth and everything. So
Well, she said she was misled, and as according to whom, we know that she's easily confused.
But she doesn't have bad intent. That's all that. That's really all that counts.
That's where it comes out. It's going to be interesting when they come and they bring her down, and they actually, they actually have the FBI talk to her under oath. I think we're going to see some of those stories she's given, like on national TV. Those might change slightly.
I don't know. I really don't see happy days ahead for us. I think we're in a shit mess, man. And I'll tell you what, everybody should kind of get somewhat prepared. Whether it's if you do not own a firearm, consider getting one. If you have one and you're not very familiar with it, become familiar with it. I know we've got some people tonight who are like thinking about taking some firearms training, and for women in particular, something you got to look at is something that you're able to control. What might be a perfect firearm for me may not be a perfect firearm for somebody with lesser body strength. And I mean, I'm not like Lou Ferrigno or anything, but a man just typically has more upper body strength than a woman. So a lady wouldn't necessarily be well off with a 44 Magnum, a Smith & Wesson 629 with a 2.5-inch mountain barrel on it. That's the backpacker's gun for bears. That may not be the ideal self-defense round for somebody. A Ruger 1022 that they may be able to fire accurately and rapidly may be a far better weapon than something that they know that they'll flinch when they pull that trigger.
Yeah, that's where the familiarity comes into play. And like I said, before you decide to go ahead and make a purchase of a firearm, do yourself a favor and visit a gun store that has a range where you can actually rent firearms prior to making a decision to buy. Because number one, there's nothing that's a substitute for actual trigger time, nothing that's a substitute for putting your hands on something that you intend to purchase I don't think that a lot of people really like to make a purchase without putting something in their hands. I mean, we're Americans. That's what we do. Like, whenever we decide we want to purchase a Middle East country, we put all of our soldiers in it. So, yeah, we want to put our hands on
Our
stuff.
hands all over that.
Yeah,
We breathe the hell out of that place.
that's right. So, the funny thing is that you've got a lot of opportunities to go out and have this chance to shoot the firearm that you may be thinking about purchasing, and it's just going to go ahead and either solidify your decision or show you that you may have made an error in your choice.
I think one of the greatest things to find in your general area is a range that has a rental program. And usually, if you go into the range that has a rental program, they've also got a shop where they sell firearms. And if you show that you've got the intent, you are, looking to purchase a firearm, usually they'll rent you a firearm that you're looking to purchase. Maybe not one brand new off the rack, but they'll have one there that is for rental use. And I mean, pretty much everything except for probably the most low end of the firearms. Although I do know of a couple of ranges that have high points for rental, so people can say I fired a high point, I guess. That could be, I'd say that's an investment akin to taking a vehicle to a mechanic before buying a used vehicle.
Exactly.
A good friend or a mechanic, and if you did that, you pay a mechanic, a certain fee. If you took it to a friend, my God, what kind of a friend are you if you don't show up with a 12-pack of beer, or, take the guy to lunch or something?
Yeah, and what kind of work are you going to get in return?
Yeah. But I mean, and not only that, but I mean, that's just, you have to respect somebody. I mean, you pay your doctor when you go see your doctor. This is along those lines. He's your car doctor. So, going to a range and spending, and it depends on the range. Some ranges, I mean, it is a tough economy, and they may be looking to make the absolute bottom dollar on everything. So, they probably, there is that chance that they will try and stick you for the $11 rental fee on every firearm or something. But in the end, that could be worth it. Although you got to kind of like amortize out with the price of, let's say you're looking to not spend any more than $300. Well, I think if that's kind of your limit, maybe not necessarily a rental is what you should look at, but maybe more people's online experiences and just take a simple search and put in whatever model firearm you're looking at and put in review, and there will be many hundreds of thousands of reviews of every firearm you can possibly put in there that's a modern firearm. And I think you could save a couple bucks doing that, but I mean, nothing really does beat the experience putting your hands on it.
Yeah, certainly, and certainly you definitely want to go through 1 to 2 boxes of ammo. I would say you will want to put about 100 rounds downrange in that firearm to see if you are competent and capable with it. And there's like I said, there's no substitute for actually getting range time in. And some of these NRA sponsored concealed carry permit classes, they'll actually get you time on the range in addition to getting you certified to have a concealed carry if it's available in your jurisdiction.
And some places may not have a concealed carry. Some places may have like they have in Illinois, they have a firearms owner identification card. And that is basically your permit. And other places, they have, like in Canada, they have a PAL, which is a possession and acquisition license. So in many of these places, you have to take certain classes and be able to pass the test.
Yeah, certainly. In places like California, there's a firearms competency test that you must take prior to purchasing a firearm.
And I don't even think we can actually reference California for anything because, I mean, the laws there change almost on a weekly basis. There's always a new bill in their House or their Senate. And each one is more restrictive than the last and just as ineffective as every one of before them. I see the latest is they want an increase on the cost of concealed weapon permits.
Yeah,
which I don't know how that.
In my local jurisdiction, we're looking at $50 for every application.
I have no idea what it is in California, but number one, I know that it's completely and ludicrously difficult to get a concealed weapon permit in many counties in California, and I can't see that enough concealed weapon permit holders have created uh, discord and an unharmonious river crab situation in the state of California to where it would necessitate an increase in the cost. And I think that's kind of like a destroy it by taxing it sort of event that they're doing there. And usually when we see that, that's almost the greatest bit of discrimination you can you'll encounter, because that's denying the poor the right to defend themselves and really turning them into wards of the state. And
Well, aren't they wards of the state already?
well, you find that there's a lot of working poor people out there that aren't necessarily wards of the state and aren't happy with their situation. And to deny those people a right to a low-priced firearm with a low-priced functional firearm and to a reasonable, permit fee for those permitted areas, it really gets into like a really ugly gray area right there. I think it's far more dangerous than ID for voting or anything like that.
Oh, you can't do that because you're going to disenfranchise people.
Right. But we can disenfranchise poor people from defending themselves,
Yeah.
and we can look at. I believe it's either Minnesota or Wisconsin. They've got a melt limit law, and it's a minimum temperature law that a firearm must be able to withstand this certain temperature. Which I don't know exactly how that plays now with the polymer firearms, but that law was initially enacted to kind of put a damper on what they call the Saturday night specials. It's more to like weed out the pistols made out of Zamac and zinc alloy frame firearms, which usually are almost always the lower cost firearm.
Right.
And that to me, that's pretty discriminatory.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, Michael, we're getting down to the wire, so we definitely need to hit some 4 rules of firearm safety.
Let's do that. First rule of firearm safety is every firearm is loaded until you physically and visually inspect that it is not loaded. So remove the magazine, keep that action open, and look in the chamber and make sure there's no bullets sitting in there. Rule number 2 is keep the firearm pointed in a safe direction at all times. Do not cover anything you do not wish to destroy with that firearm. Rule number 3 is know what is your target and know what's beyond your target at all times. And rule number 4, the most important rule, the most vital rule, if you get nothing else from this show, please get this and get this through your head now. Keep your booger hook off the bang switch until you discharge the weapon. And I keep that finger outside of the trigger guard, let it ride alongside the side of the frame. Just don't put it on the trigger until you're ready to fire. If you have whatever your target is in sight, do not put your finger on the trigger.
Yeah, and that's one of those things. We talked about hunting season coming up, and for most places, it happens for general firearms, happens in November. Maybe it'll go through the end of January or beginning of February, depending upon where you're at. One of the things that Michael references is making sure that you have a good backstop. And, a backstop is not constituted by a bunch of trees behind whatever you're trying to shoot. You just got to make sure. Yeah.
A lake is not a backstop.
Exactly.
A lake is actually exact opposite of a backstop. Very often, it will make the firearm skip, or the fire ground skip, and create a very hazardous situation. So water is not a good
exactly. And one of the things that I can tell you as a difference between obtaining your hunting license in Germany and doing your shooting proficiency test there versus in the United States is they'll make sure that you're also proficient with your firearms in terms of doing that shooting test. One of the things that is almost required is that stalking as a type of hunting, walking through the woods with a firearm is not really encouraged there, because every year you've got people who decide to violate those rules of firearm safety, and they shoot things that either A, they were not sure of, or B, they did not verify that they had a good backstop. And people they walk through cornfields in Germany all the time because cornfields are between every village, and it's not like in the States where you can drive 30 miles between towns. In Germany, you're driving, 5 minutes, there's a town. 5 minutes, there's fields. 5 minutes, there's towns. And a lot of people like to walk around drunk in Germany, and they just cut through cornfields. And at least in my time there was an incident where an individual was pig hunting in the middle of the night using a 9.3 by 62, and he shot what he thought was a pig walking through the cornfield, and it ended up being a drunk college student who was stumbling his way back from an Oktoberfest celebration.
That will leave a mark.
Yeah, I don't want to be shot by anything, much less a rifle in 9 millimeter. Bad day. So yeah, looks like we've had some.
Hey, hey, can you hear me?